My name is Pichi Sadu. Thank you for joining us. The Inspector General of Police, John Kwadwo, has assured Ghanaians domiciled in other West African countries the police has no plans to bar them from returning to exercise the franchise on December 7. Executives of the opposition New Patriotic Party in the Volta region have expressed concern about the influx of Togolese into Ghana on election day to vote and is threatening to stop all such aliens. At a media briefing after meeting with the Volta region election task force in Ho, however, John Kwadwo said his outfit would ensure Ghanaians duly registered but resident outside Ghana would be allowed in to exercise their franchise, and that it would be unlawful for security officials manning the country's borders to attempt to prevent them from entering the country on election day. The IGP indicated that any individual with a requisite document would be granted access into Ghana to go about his or her businesses with no restraint on the election day. COP John Kwadwo, however, employed the citizenry to be vigilant at the various polling stations and report any suspected imposter who attempts to vote while his or her name is not on the voters' register.
I don't think Togolese have any mandate to come and vote here. But you know the long-standing historic history between the Volta region and Togo for that matter. And all that we are saying is that any Ghanaian is free to stay anywhere and work. So if you are living outside the African continent and you are duly registered and your papers are ready, you can fly in, nobody can stop you at the airport for not coming. In the same wise, if to eke out a living genuinely and lawfully, you find yourself in a country either within our borders or without, when I say without, that is the distance, I don't think anybody can stop you. And the security agencies will ensure that everybody who's supposed to vote or who's supposed to have easy access to and from the country across the border should be allowed to vote.
COP John Kwadwo also stated that it would be a hasty decision for the police administration to ban political parties from organizing health walks, adding his outfit would act on banning such walks at the appropriate time to avoid public backlash. He added that banning political health walks would be unfair to smaller political parties, since all three clashes witnessed so far were between supporters of the two dominant parties, the New Patriotic Party and the National Democratic Congress. Minister of the Interior, Prosper Bani, entreated politicians not to engage in hate speech on their campaign trails as campaign activities heat up. He, however, warned that any individual or group that aimed to plunge the country into chaos during the elections would be apprehended and prosecuted.
That the 7th December day is not a holiday. It's not a statutory holiday. And as in other cases, we expect that our institutions will provide the environment for all citizens, those working and not working, to be able to engage in their democratic activity by going out to vote, be able to travel from one part of the country to the other without any hindrances, except those security forces that have been mandated to police the polls. They will be given some restrictions, and they all have been briefed already.
Prosper Bani was on a day's working visit to the Volta region together with commanders of prison, fire and immigration services, the Inspector General of Police and the National Coordinator of the National Disaster Management Organization. The team visited the whole central prison where they interacted with the inmates on challenges at the male and female cells. Prosper Bani assured the inmates that government would soon commence construction of a rehabilitation center at the prison yard to help equip them with employable skills. Fred Kwame Asari's report for Joy News. Still on the elections, visually impaired voters will be able to vote for their preferred candidate in next month's elections without potential interference by their aid. It follows the introduction of tactile jackets to facilitate the voting process for visually impaired. Impaired reports from the Ashanti region.
Voters with visual impairment say they have over the years been unable to choose for themselves the people they want to vote for. There are reports of some aides thumbprinting for candidates other than the ones directed by the owner of the vote. The secrecy of the ballot is also compromised and breach of the law. Thanks, however, to the Electoral Commission and the UK aid, 250 visually impaired persons in the Ashanti region are being trained on how to use the Tata Jacket ballot. They, in turn, will train others on the devices. Some visually impaired persons who attended the training described as an improvement in the country's election management.
We were introduced to the Tata voting jacket. This jacket means there are some dots on your left side, and there are some holes. So if you trace on your left side and the person you want to vote for, he is in the number 2 or 3 position, your left thumb will guide you and you thumbprint it against it directly so that you will not miss the person whom you want to vote for. So it is giving us a direct voting without spoiling even the ballot paper.
Whenever I was going to vote, I had to go with a guide to vote for me or to help me vote. And mostly the guide was voting, because I had the fear that I could vote, the vote could go to 2 people, which will make my voting a spoiled one. People may appear to be very kind, be in the same party with you. However, they may vote for you and may vote for their own.
Presidential candidate of the Progressive People's Party, Dr. Papakwesi Indum, has criticized the tax system that Ghana operates with. Given his views at the first of 2 Afriyie debates yesterday, Dr. Indum said the country has adopted a lazy approach to taxing, which he says has become counterproductive.
I have had the occasion to say very clearly that what we are practicing is a lazy man's approach to taxation. And so what government does is energy. Everybody needs power. Everybody needs petrol. And so they pile on the taxes there because we can't live without them. Okay, that the few people who pay tax, so they squeeze us some more, and then people give up, and the tax, the amount of tax goes down. So my point is that if we get away from the lazy man's approach to taxation, what we will then end up doing is to do the right kinds of things. Specifically, I've talked earlier on about the implementation of the National Identification System, which comes with a unique numbering scheme, which then, if you apply it, then it means you go and buy a house, you go and sell a house, you go and rent a house, you do all of those kinds of things. Well, it's recorded and we know you earn income, and therefore you pay tax. And if we are able to do all of those things, then I believe that we can, within 4 years, reduce the level of taxation for those who are paying tax now by at least 50% in this country. Because we would have expanded the numbers of people who are coming in, would have increased productivity, and therefore we would be able to raise more money by applying the funds that come from the people who are now producing. And we talk about infrastructure. Look, infrastructure, we are spending on infrastructure that is not related to productivity. And that is one important matter we need to address. And so when you go to those areas, for example, in the Western region, where cocoa is being grown, where gold is being produced, where bauxite and all those kinds of things are being produced, they have terrible, horrible roads. You go to Sampa, you go to Tuabodom, you go to the places in the Brongahafu where they are growing cashew and so on and so forth, the roads are terrible. So we need to increase the level of infrastructure that leads to productivity. That is what will help us eventually to reduce this tax burden that is there. And you know what happens in Ghana? When somebody sees you that you are being successful, the first thing that, if they don't like you, they come to you is, are you paying tax? They don't ask you, how can we help you to produce more? They come to punish you. And so we need to make sure that we change that attitude. And for me, by changing that attitude, more people will encourage to produce more, will collect more tax from more people, and therefore the rate will go down.
On his part, independent candidate Jacob Oseyabo admonished local companies to rope in the informal sector to help boost taxing in Ghana.
Every country needs taxes in order to develop. But the most important thing is as to how to optimize that taxation. Now, in Ghana, our major problem is the fact that we have only a few of us in the formal sectors who are being taxed. And that is why we have that high level of tax burden on them, which is not actually helping. One of the means, just as I've indicated, is the establishment of the National Electronic Data Infrastructure. I had a discussion with TUC last week, and I told them that it's good for them to also expand their union to bring in the informal sector, because in most of the African countries, we have the three sectors of our economy. That is the formal sector, that is where we have the informal sector and the traditional sector. Now, if we are able to expand our tax bracket to bring in the informal sector and the traditional sectors, that is where we have about 80% of the ordinary Ghanaian there. If we're able to expand that, then we'll be in a position to build upon that. Now, we're talking about infrastructure. It's good, we need to develop that. If we are creating wealth from our own economy, we'll be able to do that. It's not about an issue of just establishing or creating infrastructure for its sake. In businesses, we have what we call return on assets. And so we need to really find out whether that infrastructure that the government wants to embark on, is it not politically motivated? For you to build huge schools in certain places that we don't even have students to occupy them, it's not productive enough. Meanwhile, if we have used that same amount to have upgraded a technical school somewhere, it could have served the nation better, and for us, we can actually have the products coming out to serve all of us. And so what we need, yes, infrastructure we need, but we need to do analysis on the return of its access to the country before we embark on. If we did that, then as a nation, we'll have the key to our development.
Dr. Edward Mohammed, the PNC presidential candidate, however, believes the problem is corruption.
Corruption is part of the problem. I will tell you this. In 1973, when I was a doctor in Alergu, Champong tried to bring a national identification system. They paid monies to contractors, they chopped the money. Later, another government tried, they chopped the money. Between Mills and Kwadwo, monies were chopped. So basically, until we are able to have an identification system for people, I mentioned earlier real estate taxes, for example. You can't collect them because there are no addresses, you know. And when people go and borrow money, they can easily change their abodes. You can't trace them, so banks are, not interested in lending money. We can do simple things that will put the system in place.
You're watching News Desk on Joy News, your election headquarters. Stay with us. When we come back, we'll bring you more.